Let's be honest, in today's world of constant change, mastering risk isn't some niche skill anymore. It's absolutely core to being a great leader. So in this explainer, we're going to give you the executive's playbook for navigating all that uncertainty and show you how to turn potential threats into some of your biggest strategic wins. Let's dive in.
So just let that question sink in for a second. We spend all this time building strategies around things we think we can predict, our competitors, market trends. But what happens when the thing that really hits you is something that wasn't even on your radar? I'm not talking about small bumps in the road. I mean the kind of shocks that can totally reshape your entire industry before you've even had your morning coffee.
Well, these unpredictable shocks actually have a name. They're called black swan events. The name really captures what they are. They're incredibly rare. They have a massive, massive impact. But the most telling thing about them is what happens after the fact. That's when you hear that inevitable chorus of people saying, "Oh, we should have seen that coming."
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. Think about it. The 2008 financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, Brexit, these were all black swans. They didn't just rattle the markets. They were a huge wake-up call that trying to drive forward while only looking in the rearview mirror is, well, it's a recipe for disaster.
And here's the really critical takeaway from all this. Our old-school forecasting models are, frankly, broken. They're built to see patterns from past data. But black swans, by their very definition, they break the pattern. So what does that mean for us? It means we have to stop trying to predict the future and start preparing for any future. It's a shift from prediction to resilience. So if we can't predict everything, what can we do? How do you build an organization that can actually weather any storm? Well, you start with a proven structure. And we're about to walk through the gold standard framework for that. It's called the 3 lines of defense.
Okay, now this might look a little complicated at first glance, but stick with me, because the beauty of this whole model is its clarity. It's all about organizing who's accountable for what. You've got the board at the very top and senior management right below them, overseeing these 3 distinct lines. The first line is where the business actually happens, the second line keeps an eye on things, and the third line gives everyone independent assurance. It's a really clear blueprint for who owns what.
So let's start with the first line. Think of these folks as your boots on the ground. These are the managers and the teams doing the work day in and day out. They own the risks in their part of the business, which makes them your most important frontline sensor for any potential issues.
Next up is the second line. If the first line is the players on the field, the second line is kind of like the coaching staff. I'm talking about your specialists in risk management, compliance, legal. They don't own the risks themselves, but they create the playbook. They provide the policies, the tools, and the expert advice to help that first line manage risk effectively.
And finally, we have the third line, internal audit. Now, their independence is absolutely key here. They report directly to the board, not to management. Their entire job is to be the unbiased referee, giving an objective assessment of how well the first 2 lines are actually working. They're basically the board's eyes and ears on the ground.
All right, so we've got the organizational structure, the who, all sorted out. But what about the how? How does this all come to life? Let's move from the blueprint to the actual playbook, the practical, step-by-step process for assessing risk.
And the good news is, the process itself is refreshingly simple. It really just boils down to 3 repeatable steps. First, you identify risks. Second, you assess how big of a deal they are. And third, you mitigate them with a clear plan. Let's walk through each one.
Step 1 is all about identification. And the main thing here is to cast a really wide net. You've got to think broadly. What are your strategic risks, like a new competitor who could eat your lunch? What about operational risks, like a shaky supply chain, or external ones, like new regulations? By putting them into categories, you start to bring some order to the chaos.
Okay, so once you have your big list of potential worries, you move to step 2, assess. This is where it gets really practical. For every single risk on your list, you just ask 2 simple questions. First, what are the odds this actually happens? And second, if it does happen, how bad is it going to be? This simple exercise turns a long, scary list into a focused set of priorities.
And this is the tool that makes it all click. It's a risk matrix. Super simple, right? On one side, you've got likelihood, from low to high. On the other, you've got impact. You just plot each risk on the grid and bam, you get instant clarity. Anything that lands in that top right corner, high likelihood, high impact, well, that's what you need to focus on right now.
Which brings us to our final step, step 3, mitigation. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's all about action. Based on your assessment, you create a plan. Can you avoid a risk entirely? Maybe. Can you do something to reduce its impact? Often. Or do you just need a really solid plan B for when it happens? This is where you take control.
Now, let's zoom out a bit. We've been talking about process, but let's get back to strategy. Because here's the thing about risk management. It's not just about preventing bad things from happening, it's also about enabling good things to happen.
And this is where a really crucial strategic concept comes in: risk appetite. It sounds a bit formal, but all it really means is this: how much risk are you willing to deliberately take on to achieve your goals? You see, the point isn't to get to zero risk. That's impossible. The point is to be smart and intentional about the bets you make to win.
I just love this quote because it completely reframes the whole conversation. Every risk has two sides to it. A new technology might be a risk to your current business model, for sure, but it could also be a massive opportunity if you're the first one to embrace it. Your risk appetite is what helps you decide where to draw that line.
And let me be absolutely clear about this. Defining that risk appetite is a leadership responsibility, period. This is a conversation that has to happen at the board and senior management level. Why? Because it's the critical link that connects all of your day-to-day risk activities directly to your biggest, most important business goals.
So, we've got a structure, a process, and a strategic alignment. The final piece of the puzzle is communication. How do you take all this complex information and report it to the board in a way that actually helps them make clear, confident decisions?
The whole goal of reporting risk isn't to walk into the boardroom and scare everybody. It's actually the opposite. It's to instill confidence. You want to show them, hey, we see the potential challenges out there, and we've got smart, proactive plans in place to handle them.
And when it comes to boards, the best way to communicate is almost always visual. A risk heat map like this one is an incredibly powerful tool. It's basically the risk matrix we saw earlier, just color-coded. Green is low risk, yellow is keep an eye on it, and red means all hands on deck. It boils down tons of complexity into one single intuitive picture that lets leadership see the whole landscape in an instant.
So this is the question I really want to leave you with. Without that kind of clear, visual, and strategically aligned reporting, is your board truly seeing the full picture they need to steer the ship? Or are they flying a little bit blind? Because ultimately, that's what this is all about. Mastering risk isn't about building a fortress and hiding from the world. It's about building an organization that's so nimble, so resilient, and so intelligent that it can not only handle the shocks, but it can confidently go out and seize the opportunities that all this uncertainty inevitably creates.